Why is it always doing this?
There we go. And we are live with episode 3 of the X-Men 97 Aftershow. It's an aftershow brought to you by The Keeg, where we talk about the new sequel series to the 90s X-Men show, which is now called X-Men 97, which is kind of confusing. Maybe. I don't know. What year is it? It's 2024. This is X-Men 97. We're here to talk about episode 3, Fire Made Flesh. I'm your host, Dimithri Perera, and if you're watching us live, you're watching us on twitch.tv/The Keeg Show or youtube.com/The Keeg Show, or maybe you're listening to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. I got my special guest here. It's been a long time since I've had him on the show. We got Brian Long, a.k.a. Captain Comic Rex. Brian, let me hear your voice.
Hello, here is my voice. How is everyone doing this evening? X-Men, you love them. Excited to be talking about
Gotta
them.
love them.
Gotta love them. Gotta love those wacky X-Men. It's 97 because that was the year the show ended.
Right. And this
So
show picks up right where it left off.
Pretty much. Yeah. What do you think about the take? This is my take on it.
Please keep asking me questions because I am run ragged by these podcasts, and if you could just be the host and run the show, please feel free.
I like to flip the script on you a little bit.
Yeah, I am for it. Let me sit back and relax, you know?
You're always asking everyone questions, but no one's asking you questions.
Tell me.
So I really enjoyed the first 3 episodes of this show quite a bit.
Yeah.
I almost feel like, though, that I like it in spite of it being a 90s throwback. I think the writing and the animation are of such a strong quality that I almost feel like a part of me wishes that they hadn't done it as a throwback and had just done it as like, here's a new X-Men cartoon with its own distinct style and whatnot.
So it's funny how there are creative decisions that Marvel has to make because of their almost bankruptcy, selling all the rights to different studios, mistake that they made 30 years ago, right?
Right.
Like, it's funny how they're still paying it off creatively.
Sure.
They're having a twist and contort and whatever. And sometimes the creativity that they do like works out, because Guardians of the Galaxy as a franchise was not anything until they needed to use it in the MCU, and then they made it better.
I mean, you could argue that the Avengers was not even a full-blown A-list franchise.
Right. I think eventually,
until the movies.
If the MCU had Spider-Man, which was sold to Sony at the time, and had X-Men and Fantastic Four, which were both Fox properties at the time, if they had those, I think they would have eventually gotten to the Avengers, but the Avengers would not be the premier superhero team in the MCU. No. It would have been just the X-Men. Because 100%. People nowadays don't realize, like, X-Men and Spider-Man were the 2 biggest things Marvel had for decades. And then the reason they were so huge, or the reason they got sold off, is because they were so huge. And the reason the MCU had to deal without them is because they were so huge, the other companies didn't want to get rid of them, right?
The movie rights, specifically.
Right, the movie rights. And so, because of that, that has affected the comics and the MCU, because they're synergetic, whatever you want to call it. And they've had to make their creative decisions off of not having those properties, right?
Right.
And now I got hiccups. But
and because they were under the whims of Ike Perlmutter, who is a madman. Clear.
Not just Ike Perlmutter for sure is a madman. And then also recently has been this Peltz guy, which is Nicola Peltz.
Oh,
I've talked about Nicola Peltz being a Nepo baby in our Avatar episodes. Because she was essentially just put into M. Night Shyamalan's Avatar because she's the daughter of a billionaire.
Right.
And that's the girl who played Katara, and she's also in Transformers 4 as Mark Wahlberg's daughter, and she's just a Nepo baby, and her father is wacko. Have you heard about like the
Is
news?
he the guy who's currently in a bid to take over the board of Disney? Is that who it was, or is this a different guy?
To take over the board of Disney, yes, but not to become
Yes,
president of Disney.
No, yeah,
That's a
but
separate
he's
thing.
he's
But
trying to do
yes.
a hostile takeover. He was the one who said like essentially those racist, sexist statements where he was like, "Why are we making movies with all women and stuff
And all black casts?" Yes.
Yeah.
I don't
If-
want to see that or whatever he said.
As if those movies aren't two of their highest grossing films and won them Academy Awards.
Which female one?
Sorry, I'm referring to
Black Panther did. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Captain Marvel, regardless of what you think of it, still made a butt ton of money
made
for
a
that
butt
first
ton of
one that
money.
came out.
But that's not the all-female cast. He's talking about the Marvels, which I also liked, but
Yeah,
it wasn't a box office success. So he can point to it and say it's not a box office success, sure, but he's disregarding all the other movies that came before it, right? And
he's
how the hell
disregarding that Disney as a franchise is built almost entirely on female audiences liking their product.
Yeah, but Disney as a franchise or as a super franchise is based off of the segmentation of gender roles, right?
Yes.
Like it's saying that like, sure, we have dolls for girls and action figures for boys, right?
Right.
And never the twain shall mix. And that's a problem. And it also makes me worry. It kind of ties in. I'm tying this back to X-Men. It made me worry about how they were going to tackle X-Men 97. So
because you were worried they wouldn't give the focus to the female characters as much,
or in general, I'm afraid of the MCU having the X-Men.
What's your concern there?
I mean, that's the MCU when they choose to push boundaries, I can believe that it has the X-Men. Otherwise, I think it could end up being a very sanitized, like, it's the difference between like the idea that and I've talked about this on previous like stuff, is that like Disney Channel shows will, when they have a very special episode where they deal with racism, they will frame racism as people just don't like you because you look different than them. And it's this almost like, yeah, that's entry level racism, like teaching racism, right? But it doesn't, like, that makes it seem like it goes both ways, and it can go every which way, that people just don't like people who are different than them.
Right.
But X-Men and real world racism isn't just that humans hate mutants and mutants hate humans. And just like real world isn't white people hate black people and black people hate white people. It's not like that. It's
right.
You know,
there's systemic things involved, and there's deeper historical issues that have to come up whenever you're discussing these systems of oppression.
Right. And so the MCU, the closest they ever got to like me believing that they could pull this off is when they were doing Captain America and Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Sure.
And that's like, I was like, okay, cool. But, you know, then, I don't know, then the audiences don't tend to deal with the nuance. So when it comes to X-Men 97, there's a couple of things. It was like, I wasn't sure how they were going to do this show. I didn't think that they needed to do a sequel to this show, because this show had, the original 90s show had 5 seasons. Wolverine and the X-Men, which was my personal, that got cut off after 1 season.
Right.
But I think they needed to reintroduce people not only to the X-Men, which you can do with any series. You just do an X-Men animated show and you reintroduce people to the X-Men. I think they had to reintroduce people's love of the X-Men. Because the most recent X-Men in pop culture was the Fox X-Men movies. And that didn't have the same love. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there are people out there that didn't put the 2 and 2 together. The X-Men 90s shows is the same as X-Men as the movies are X-Men, because they look so different and they just aren't. You know what I mean?
When you think about 90s X-Men, it's kind of the platonic ideal of X-Men when it was at its height of popularity, right? You know, that Jim Lee, Chris Claremont X-Men #1, I think to this day is still the highest selling comic book of all time. You know what I mean? You had the Pizza Hut tie-in. You had so much cultural impact and awareness of this version of X-Men specifically. I think it's do you ever listen to the Cerebro podcast?
Yeah.
Connor Goldsmith.
Yeah.
I think the comment he always makes about these characters is like, if they were on the cover of Jim Lee's X-Men #1, they stick around forever. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's ever really going to ever fully get rid of those characters because they are such an iconic, important part of X-Men's history.
I'm going to say a hot take.
Go for it.
I don't want it to sound rougher than it is because of, again, the powers at play and how race plays a part in this. I think that if Bishop wasn't a 90s character, and I think Bishop would have disappeared, and I don't think it would have mattered as much.
Sure.
Now, that being said, we have a horribly small pool of black male characters to choose from, and a horribly small pool of black female characters to choose from, just black characters in general for X-Men.
Yeah.
But, like, Bishop as a character, like, I'd rather see, like, Sync grow. And I don't mean to say I'm pitting the two against each other, because, again, it's a very small pool. Like, they should both have it. I'm just saying that, like, Bishop, the time travel thing, like, everything, like, he should have solved his purpose and, like, you know what I mean? Like, he would have solved whatever Terminator plot was going on, and then he, like, disappears. And I'm glad he doesn't, because I do like him in the show, and, like, I do like Bishop. But again, you're right, the 90s nostalgia means if you're on that cover, if you're on the show back then, you're going to come back.
Yeah, you're going to be around forever because you have that, again, that awareness that so many people had that is just with you forever. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's so many people in our generation especially who grew up with this show. And, you know, I certainly grew up with this show, and it was definitely my first exposure to X-Men in a major way. But I'll fully cop to the fact that I was much more like a Batman the Animated Series kid. You know, like, I think the X-Men 90s cartoon does a great job of adapting the comics and doing storytelling in a comic book style where you often have these long-form stories and multi-part arcs in a way that kids' cartoons were not doing.
Right.
But you go back and watch the show now, like, the animation doesn't really hold up super well. There's like a lot of like wonkiness. But you throw on any episode of Batman the Animated Series, and artistically, aesthetically, and in terms of the acting and stuff, I think it holds up incredibly well by comparison.
I mean, X-Men, the cartoon, was the best episodic sort of, or not episodic, the opposite. Like, episodic is episode by episode. Serialized. X-Men is the best example of, like, serialized comic book adaptations to animation. But you're right, the animation doesn't hold up like Batman the Animated Series does. And, like, but here's the thing. I think this X-Men 97 show, and I think the blasphemy is that as a show, I think episode 3 aside, episode 1 and 2 are better than the X-Men original series.
100%. I agree with you fully on that.
That's like, partly because of a couple of things, but sure, we have the benefit of hindsight. It's been 30 years, whatever. Sure, we can write better, and we know what, like, the audiences want something different now, and we're a little bit older. So this isn't being aimed for the same group. That being said, I do just think episodes 1 and 2 of this series is better than any of the X-Men episodes of the original 5 seasons.
I would put episode 3 up there, frankly. So I'm going to assume that you have some critiques of episode 3 in comparison to 1.
I do. And I mean, that's what we're here to talk about, right? Is episode 3.
Let's do it.
But, like, I didn't get to do a second rewatch of this episode, like I did for episodes 1 and 2. And this is just being busy and being a damn adult. I wish I could take Bishop's time slider thing and slide back a little bit. But a lot of people were upset, and I think that I don't want to just call them dumb nerds. Because I'm also kind of in this boat. I get it.
Right.
We're all dumb nerds that are like, why wasn't it this huge spanning story for Inferno? And me personally, I'm not a fan of magic related stuff in my X-Men. That's me personally. So I was never really a big fan of Inferno.
Interesting.
Just like I don't like I can only accept magic as magic. Magik. Like magic and
Rasputin,
Ilyana Rasputin.
Ilyana Rasputin.
So
the Dark Child.
Yes, I can accept her and then Pixie maybe, but I don't like magic just in general, like just magic related stuff in general. Anyway, the point.
Whimsy.
No, I like whimsy. I don't like. Well, a lot of magic to me is very Eurocentric, and which is not a problem. I just think it's overplayed. I don't need a Knights of King Arthur's Court anymore.
You really hate Arthurian elements in X-Men.
Thank you. Yes,
we've had this conversation so many times.
When we've talked about Excalibur and Knights of X, and yes, I do not like Captain Britain. I don't like the Captain Britain Corps.
Alan Moore somewhere is fuming.
I mean, Alan Moore, that's his culture, and that's okay. And that's okay. He's writing his culture, and I get it. For me personally, that's cool.
Right. Doesn't work for you. Not your time.
Good for Alan Moore. Anyway, the point being is that I didn't need Inferno to be a whole season because they would be just distracting. And people were upset that it was one episode, and that's true. I think I would have liked this if it was a 2-episode arc because it did seem rushed.
Sure.
And that's my biggest critique of this episode. I think I rated the first 2 episodes 10 out of 10. If I didn't vocally say that, that's what it was. This episode was a 7 out of 10 to me.
Sure.
But that's still good.
I have a similar feeling, but I also kind of to me, I also kind of go into these episodes with the caveat of it is a 20-minute animated series that is ostensibly for all ages. So I'm I'm fine with storytelling being a little bit compressed with these. You know what I mean? I
knew it was going to be compressed, and I do have to applaud them. I think that I'm just saying almost a directorial choice. I wish it was 2 episodes. But as far as if they were okay, we did 1 episode for this story arc, I think they did this great. Cool.
Yeah. I thought it was a hoot, and I think it was a smart way to adapt it because I feel like the original Inferno story, so much of this show, I think so far has been the rehabilitation of Scott Summers, trying really hard to prove why he is a great character and change people's perception of him. And I think if you had adapted Inferno 1-to-1, which for those of you who don't know, the Inferno story arc essentially involves Scott Summers abandoning his wife and newborn child when his dead wife comes back to life, just fully leaving them.
And that's not the Scott we want.
Yeah, I'm glad they were we can't do that if we want to make him a beloved character again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people don't understand. I think the dumb nerds, and again, we're all in the same boat. With our adaptations, some of us want really a 1-by-1 adaptation, right?
Sure.
And I don't think people can switch mediums in their head as easily. Mm-hmm. You just have to realize that for that to happen, we would have to have multiple different X-Men related cartoon series on at the same time. And in the breath of if we said a month of comics is a week of animated series, each of them having a weekly show on a different day that then can tie in all, we can't do that. We're just not going to do that.
Yeah, we're not getting an X-Statix cartoon anytime soon.
Right. I would. That being said, if Marvel said they were going to do if they said tomorrow they're they announced they're going to do an X-Statix cartoon, that would not surprise me. I could see that.
Yeah. I mean, do it in the full Mike Allred style would be really cool.
I would not be surprised. Because look, they're doing a good job with this show, and I wouldn't be surprised if they start doing more animated series, right? They're doing obviously Spider-Man freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else. Oh, another What If? I don't think we need What If anymore. Can we get rid of What If?
We can't get into a debate about what if while we're trying to discuss this episode.
I'm just saying if you have to pick. Okay, Brian, I'm just asking you if Marvel Animation could only do 3 animated shows,
okay,
like one season a year,
right?
What are the 3 properties you would have them do an animated series of?
Well, I like this X-Men show, so I guess keep the X-Men show.
Mm-hmm.
I love what I've seen so far of the like designs and stuff for that Spider-Man freshman year show.
Okay, I think yes, a Spider-Man show needs to exist.
Yeah, and aren't they doing a Wakanda themed show, like a show about like
animated
thing? Yeah, I think it's an animated show.
I heard they were going to do a live action one, Kingdom of Wakanda, but
I think it's a animated show. I'm gonna Google it.
Okay.
But yeah,
talk a
it's
lot.
called Eyes of Wakanda. It's an animated project.
Okay.
Series. I'd say do that.
I don't want to be the guy who says no to the Eyes of Wakanda. Like, I think it would be cool.
But I'm saying like, and then if What If gets the chopping block, it's like we've had 2 seasons of it that were pretty good. Like you can get out of here at this point. Like I don't need it to continue on. You know what I mean?
It's so gimmicky. It's so gimmicky.
But this also speaks to what I like, which is like, and this is also why I find this show really great, is that it leans into the comic booky side of things that the movies never touched. Right. You know what I mean? Like so many of these Fox X-Men movies, it's like it's all about Wolverine and Magneto's the bad guy, and then William Stryker's the bad guy, and then Magneto's the bad guy again, and then William Stryker's the bad guy again. It's like the same basic plots over and over, and I'm like, the X-Men should be in space. The X-Men should be fighting demons.
Okay, I wouldn't go that far.
No, they should be doing all of these things. There's
for the
so much craziness that has been kept bottled up in the films.
Yeah.
That I'm loving seeing it just come bursting out.
I'm with you. But the X-Men movies were a little bit different. And I think I wouldn't like if the Phoenix not being like a supernatural force and rather being the unchecked potential within Jean Grey. I like that twist in the movies. I'm okay with that. Like, it makes sense to not include magic or aliens. Though I love my aliens in my X-Men, I don't love my magic in my X-Men.
Sure.
Because X-Men to me are science fiction, not fantasy. But I know they're sci-fi fantasy. But this is my preference.
They're superhero comics. They're every genre at once, is what it really is.
Exactly. Yeah, superhero comics are like that, you know? But when it comes to this episode,
yes.
What I like about this series is that they have been dealing with each character really well. Like,
yes,
it isn't the Wolverine show, which is nice.
No, thank goodness, yeah.
And it's also making people fall in love with individual characters, which, like, Brian, I didn't think this would happen. I didn't think people would be talking about the X-Men as individual characters as much as I thought they would be like Wolverine and the X-Men, you know?
Right.
And the fact is, like, people are falling in love with Storm the way I've loved Storm. Because Storm's the best.
I think people have always loved Storm.
I think they love her as a concept, maybe.
Yes.
But
the
X-Men movies did not show her off.
Right. And I think the people who were into the original cartoon or into X-Men comics were always like, Storm's my number one. Right. You know what I mean?
If they kept up with it, the mainstream audience doesn't know X-Men outside of what? The movies? If or the 90s cartoon. That's it.
Right. It's idea. I love the potential. But I think speaking to what we said about what you were saying before about adaptation, like, I think they've done a really good job of showing what animation can do, which is portray these characters that are typically in static images, show their powers in a really unique way. Like, I never have seen anyone use Cyclops' optic beams as like a method of him transporting himself and moving from place to place like they did in that first fight scene he has in the first episode. I was like, holy crap, like I've never thought about that before, but like, yeah, that logically makes sense that they're a concussive force. Presumably he could use them for momentum in addition to like pushing people away from him.
Yeah.
And it's those little things that make a good adaptation, where you say, let's take this thing that's typically, sequential 2D images. What can we do with it that's different when you actually put it in motion and makes it distinct and unique? And I thought like that was really brilliant. I think in this episode, like a lot of the animation with the demons and stuff, like the monsters that were coming out in those early scenes, were horrific in such a great like body horror kind of way that I wasn't
Let's talk
expecting.
about specifics in this episode, because
let's do it.
Jean Grey finds out that she's not Jean Grey, right?
Yes, or the one we've been following for the first 2 episodes is not really Jean Grey.
The first 5 to 10 minutes of the episode, I thought they were going to do a switcheroo.
Sure.
I thought the person who came to the door was going to be Maddie.
That's what I thought was going to happen too.
And then Beast was like, nope. Hey, everybody, here's the clone.
Beast truly lived for the drama in this episode. Because he's like, everybody stop everything. They're like both in the room. Everybody's here. She's like, you need to hear what I have to say. This is crazy. This is a clone. This is the real G.
They were totally like sidestepping the whole Spider-Man Ben Reilly shit, where it was like, who's the clone? Who can say? Maybe Madeline has been the original Jean Grey the whole time. Yeah.
It was so funny, him just being like, oh my God, I need to make this announcement. Everyone needs to listen. But that surprised me, because again, I thought like they were gonna sidestep any kind of major moral ambiguity with it, like what's going to happen with the child, or like what does this mean for Scott and Madeline, I should say, their relationship. But them just kind of diving headfirst right into it, being like, no, the Madeline or the Jean that we saw these first 2 episodes at the very least was Madeline. It was not the real Jean.
Right. And they're not sure when she was switched.
Right. Yeah, and they leave it very vague. I was rewatching it, and I noticed when they're looking at Jean, the real Jean's memories, a lot of it is clips from like the animated series.
Yeah.
But it is left deliberately. Also, one of the clips they include is the meme where it's Scott and Jean kissing in the background and Wolverine in the foreground staring at the camera, which really made me laugh.
Yeah.
But they definitely leave it open-ended, and they even reference that later in the episode where they're like, I don't know when the switch happened. Like, it could have been a while ago, it could have been very recently, but here we are.
I just realized that we're meant to not know whether she was switched in the original series.
Yeah, I mean, we have a year's worth of time from the end of the show to now, right? Yes, I believe in the first episode they say it's been a year since Xavier's death.
Okay.
And it says that on Wikipedia too, looking at the descriptions of the episode. It says 1 year after Professor X died. But yeah, there's a big chunk of time there where it could have potentially happened too. But yeah, I mean, that could be a crazy twist coming down the line where we find out just how long it's been since they swapped.
Right. And also, like, I mean, there were a lot of things. Obviously, this episode hinged on Jean Grey, the clone, Madeline Pryor, but then it had some horror elements. How do you feel about these horror elements? Because everybody had a different fear, right? I'm trying to remember what each one was.
So there was the one that made me laugh was Remy walking in on Rogue and Magneto, recreating that cover of X-Men where it's like Rogue in her Savage Land tattered costume and Magneto there, and them just like melting into each other, which was very gross.
Very
but that
Cronenberg, like
yes,
The Thing, right?
Yes. There was that one. There's the one where it's Roberto's mom appear, like the monster comes out of the TV where Jubilee and Roberto are watching, and it turns into his mom. There was the one that I liked was Cyclops' greatest fear is getting yelled at by Professor X, which I thought was very funny because he's like, "Demerits, boy," and then I didn't recognize who that character was that was speaking to Bishop. She also had M.
It's Shard.
Shard. What's her real name?
It's his sister. I think her name is Shard.
Shard. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm looking now. She was in the X-Men cartoon as well.
She's
The
one.
original part.
She's Bishop's sister from the future,
Okay, cool. Yeah.
and
So
she's
Shard,
also an XSE enforcer, Xavier security enforcer, right?
yes.
Um,
Um, the wildest one though
mhm.
was Morph walking in on Logan in the shower,
Yes.
and it turning out to be a Mr. Sinister voice coming out of him. Um, to your point where you talked about like stuff that the MCU probably won't adapt, this show, these first 3 episodes, very sexually charged. A lot of sexual tension, a lot of love triangles, in a way where I'm like, wow, like we're not even getting these in superhero movies anymore. Like this is a surprise to see how much romantic and sexual tension is existing among these characters.
The MCU. Okay, well, first things first. I think what people don't realize. The last episode when we talked about episodes 1 and 2, we had Sarah. We had Sarah B. Movies and Tea,
Mm-hmm.
on the show, and Sarah. This is the first X-Men property she's ever touched,
Yes,
and
a hell of a
so
way to start.
it's funny because I was trying to figure out like what did she think, what did
Right.
and I had to tell her, I was like, just so you know, in the X-Men comics everybody dates everybody,
Yeah,
and like
it's a
that's
lot of
just
soap opera drama.
there's a lot of like sexual soap opera drama, and so like sure there are long lost twins and stuff, and then there's also like babies being born, and then there's the will they won't theys and whatnot, and so I'm going to challenge what you said. The MCU would do sexual tension for the straight characters.
Yes, yes.
But let's talk about it. People are upset. I don't know why people are upset. People need to shut the fuck up.
What are they upset about specifically? There's so many things.
Morph likes Wolverine. Yeah, so what? If Morph has a crush on Wolverine, so what?
Who cares? Who cares?
So what? What you think Morph needs to have a crush on like a girl? Like what is it? It doesn't.
Yeah.
What is
right.
it? This is a guy who. This is not a guy. This is the
a non-binary.
Let me refresh. Yes, non-binary character. Morph can do whatever they want, right? And so, what is the big deal? Come on.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, when you read old X-Men comics, like Chris Claremont was putting his weird sexual hangups in every single storyline. So the fact that people are just now realizing that there's a lot of these like undertones to X-Men, straight or otherwise, is very funny to me, because it's one of those things like as a kid you don't realize it. You get older, you're like, man, everybody's in fetish gear. Why is that? You're like, oh right, Chris Claremont hung out in some Soho clubs in the 70s and had some awakenings, I think, about himself.
And like, the Hellfire Club in general.
Yeah, like
that was on a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, so none of this is new, but people are always going to be mad about stuff. But it's also funny too, because it's like, of any character that you're going to make non-binary, of course it's like the shapeshifter. That makes logical sense for that character to be non-binary.
I mean, I'm all for the acceptance of Morph as a non-binary character. I also think that like I don't know, it's weird. It's obvious Morph would be non-binary, or Morph can be whatever they want, but like does it fictionalize like non-binary people? I'm not sure.
Oh, in the way that sometimes like you'll have an alien race stand in for like a real oppressed class. Is that what you mean?
It's like, yeah, or like when they say like Lando Calrissian. Shout out to Modern Merlin out there in our Twitch chat. It's like when they used to say like Lando Calrissian is pansexual. He'll have a relationship with a robot or an alien or whatever, but that just fictionalizes pansexuality.
Right.
So I don't know how it works, but the point being is that like, why I think people just want to be outraged that like life is passing them by and the times are changing. Like I don't know what to say. I don't know what
they're
to say.
Literally Boulevard Trask in the first episode, where they're like, you don't understand what it's like, the future's leaving you behind.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, And we're not saying that people themselves have to change. It's that you have to understand that other people are allowed to change. Like,
Exactly.
you don't have to be, everybody doesn't have to be non-binary. It's just they
You just have to accept that there are people who are not.
Yeah, or
Get over
like
it.
you don't have to be gay. You just have to accept that gay people exist, and thus, in a piece of media that is trying to show representation and accurate representation, there are going to be gay characters in your media. Like,
Right.
I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that like people of other colors exist and gay people exist, but then have all straight white casts. I mean, this isn't Friends.
Well,
right?
And this is, for as much as I love the X-Men and I love the idea of it being an allegory, like the messiness of the allegory is where you really take a step back and be like, well, the original 5 X-Men were all white people. Like, you can't really, as much as people like to give Stanley and Jack Kirby credit for inventing a racial allegory, it's like, they kind of stumbled into it by accident. They
did what the Disney Channel stuff that I was saying do.
Yeah.
They did it. People dislike us because we're different. And it's like, yeah, people dislike the Hulk because he's different, but they're not racist against the Hulk. They're racist against mutants, right? Like it's a different sort of thing. Like, yeah, nobody, like, it sucks when people dislike other people who are different. It's just a different set of parameters depending on what that difference is.
Right. Exactly.
Disliking a woman for being a woman is different. It's just,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's acceptable. I'm just saying it is just a different thing.
It's a different type of prejudice, a different type of bias.
Right. It's because of what people view their role in society is. And so mutants, Friends of Humanity, I think the joke is that people realize that they are the Friends of Humanity. Like,
yeah, 100%.
It's like, oh man.
It's too bad this show takes place in 1997, because if it took place now, we'd have like the Friends of Humanity just shit posting on Twitter and making YouTube videos all day about woke media, woke mutant friendly movies that are infesting and brainwashing their children.
and that's also the thing about allegories in general. No allegory is going to be exact. Right? There are times where the metaphor of mutantdom is shown through like a allegory for like homosexuality, right? We see that in the X-Men movies a little bit, right? With Bryan Singer's X-Men 2. But then sometimes we deal with the mutant metaphor as an allegory for like racial rights, right? It just depends, and both of those two fight for civil rights are different too, right? They overlap in many ways intersectionally, but they are different. So like mutants aren't. It's weird. Mutants aren't the gay struggle. Mutants aren't the racial struggle, but they are.
They're kind of the way I always talk about it in my class when we talk about the idea of allegory, and I bring up the X-Men, is they're an allegory for oppression, right? Like, because then you can even talk about Magneto and the idea of his Jewishness being the thing that caused him to experience oppression, and then when he gets older and experiences oppression of a different type as a mutant, it reminds him of the thing that his people faced, right?
Yeah.
So it's a larger oppression-based allegory in the ways that oppression infiltrates our society and influences people on a social level, but influences people on a political level too. And that's kind of what makes it such a flexible allegory, is because it can apply to so many different things. And sometimes they fight demons, like they did this week.
So yeah, let's finish this episode by talking about this this episode. What happens essentially? Madeline Pryor goes like mad in a way. She has psychic powers, and they're manifesting themselves as fears and goblins and demons and whatever. How did you feel about two things? One is, where the hell did she get the name Madeline Pryor? And where the hell did she get the name Goblin Queen? Why? Like, they were just shoehorning the
Goblin Queen, I have literally no explanation for. Like that, I agree with you. That was definitely like one of those moments where I'm like cramming this all into one episode. Doesn't really make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that it's like, wait, why? Where did this name come from? What's happening here?
Yeah.
Whether it's Goblin Queen or even Madeline Pryor as a name. That being said, I did enjoy her Sailor Moon transformation.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool. I liked the bits where Mr. Sinister was like whispering to her through the baby monitor, and that sort of like pushing her towards the madness. I think that moment and one of the other like fight sequences and stuff in this episode, the previous episodes, you really see the difference of a world where this show is being produced after anime has become so popular in America.
Yeah.
Versus when the show was being made and anime was still like slowly becoming popularized. Because I feel like so much of the dynamicism, especially of the action sequences, is really anime influenced.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, also 90s anime also necessarily wasn't the height of action sequences also. Like they had good stuff.
Sure.
But it wasn't what we have now.
Sure. But even then I don't know how often. I mean, maybe I'm generalizing, but because Japanese anime has become so much more ubiquitous, I feel like animators working in the industry now have it in their cultural, in their artistic vocabulary a lot more than they did when the show was first being made.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah. I don't think that X-Men, the original series, would have been better had it followed the anime of that time.
Sure. No, 100%. 100%.
In the end of this episode, I do want to bring up the end of, like, I have no idea what's going to happen in episode 4. Like, how are they they're not going to, they're going to have to deal with the consequences of episode 3, right? Madeline Pryor and Jean Grey, like, Maddie goes on the road. And I wish they would just call her Maddie, because it's just, I don't know, it's too formal. And then the baby, which is Nathan, goes with Bishop into the future, which I think I thought was cool.
Realized until watching this that, and obviously Cable and Mr. Sinister have a lot of like overlap. I never realized that he has the same name as Mr. Sinister until this episode.
Didn't realize that either until recently.
And I don't know if that was deliberate or not, but I was like, oh wait, what the hell?
You know what I thought of when I was like, okay, baby Nathan. I was thinking to myself, I was like, I think it was tying in with like when I was thinking about Harry Potter names where they named the kids Albus Severus, and I'm like, why didn't they name the kid Charles? Why didn't they name the kid, So I was like, okay, who's Nathan? Then I was like, maybe there's like a Nathan that's a father of one of them, or a grandfather, and it's a familial name. He couldn't have come out of nowhere. And then I was like, oh shit, it's Sinister.
Right.
It's Sinister. Why did it take me 30 some years for me to realize that baby Nathan is named after Nathaniel Essex?
Like a subliminal thing that was in Maddie's mind when they named her. I was like, oh shit. Yeah.
Also,
that's crazy.
A trivia question that I asked for when we did a live game show the other day at the WonderCon after party that I hosted called Geeking Out. One of my questions was, which X-Men character is the only biological child of Scott Summers and Jean Grey the old-fashioned way?
Is it Rachel Summers?
It's Rachel.
Yeah.
Because Cable is Maddie and Cyclops.
Maddie's
their kid the old-fashioned way, and then X-Man is Jean Grey and Scott's kid, not the old-fashioned way because he's a test tube baby. Rachel is the only old-fashioned way between the two of them.
I like calling it the old-fashioned.
Via fuck. What am I supposed to say? It's a game show, Brian.
Gotta keep it rated E for everyone.
Yeah.
No. I thought the big fight with all the demons was really cool. I liked Magneto and Maddie's fight. That was cool. Yeah. It definitely was like not as good as the other episodes, but it was still like very fun and entertaining. And I appreciated that they did do Maddie's complete arc where she is more sympathetic than just being a, evil goblin queen woman by the end.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts? Also, the fact is, I don't think in the original series they mentioned that Cable's name is Nathan.
Yeah, I don't think they really get into Cable's whole deal in the original show at all, unless I'm totally misremembering.
I don't think
remember
so either.
Yeah.
And also another thing that I realized after the fact is that in the original series, Magneto's helmet doesn't serve a purpose until Bryan Singer and the writers of X-Men the first movie make it, which is it's Juggernaut shtick that Xavier can't see into his mind through his helmet, but not Magneto. Magneto just has the helmet for aesthetic purposes, just because it's his style.
It does look cool as hell.
But it's so weird.
It is that funny thing where they were like, wait, why the hell is this not his thing also? Because at any time, Professor Xavier presumably could go into his mind and shut him down.
Right. Do you have any final thoughts about this show before we end this episode?
No, good show. I'm excited to get into Life Death next week.
What is the premise of Life Death?
So Life Death is essentially the story in the comics where Storm, after losing her powers, meets Forge, and they kind of strike up a relationship as he plans to try to undo her powers without her realizing. I don't know if I should say this or not. Actually, I won't say it.
We'll keep the spoiler. We'll not do that spoiler.
Yeah, I'll avoid spoiler. But yes, it's essentially like a famous story where like it is part of Storm's character growth of, losing her powers and finding out who she is not as a mutant and without her powers. It's a really good story.
Yeah, I do like the ending of this episode where Forge meets Storm. Just so you know, in my idea, I had planned an X-Men movie for the MCU. Storm and Forge are two of the main characters, and they're dating in my MCU X-Men. So
I mean, a good choice.
Thank you.
They also, the actor playing, I saw it earlier, the actor playing Forge is Gil Birmingham, who is a very famous Native American actor, and he's very good. And I always enjoy him when he pops up and stuff. So I was excited to see he's playing Forge in this.
Nice.
He's probably best known as, I think it's Jacob's dad in the Twilight movies.
Oh, okay.
But he was also really good in movies like Hell or High Water, and he's been in a bunch of stuff. He's on what's it called, Yellowstone.
I'll have to.
So I was like, oh, good pick. Yeah, he's one of those guys you'll see him and be like, oh yeah, I've seen this guy in a million stuff.
Yeah. I hate the fact that that's all the time we have today, because it's rare that I get you on a show. Brian, where can we find you? What do you got coming up? Anything you want to plug?
Oh boy, I'm just too busy lately to do anything. So if you want to see my old TikToks while the government still legally allows you to use TikTok, you can follow me at Captain Comic Rex. That's RECS on the TikTok.
Awesome. For anyone out there who is watching and or listening, you're watching us live, you're watching us on twitch.tv/The Keeg Show, or youtube.com/The Keeg Show, or you're listening to us wherever you get your podcast from, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. If you're on social media, you can follow us at TikTok or Instagram at The Keeg Show. We're also on Facebook and Twitter and Threads and all that good stuff. Check out our new logo for The Keeg. We got a new logo.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Right now it's on Instagram and TikTok, so, do your thing. Follow us there. Patreon.com/The Keeg Show if you want to give back to The Keeg. We also, we got a bunch of other shows that are going on right now. Just basically, long story short, follow us on social media and you can find out what our other shows are. We got the X-Men 97 After Show. We got State of X, which is our monthly mutant, Marvel Mutant X-Men After Show podcast. We got Comic Talk every week, and we got the Keeg Talks mostly every weekend. So, definitely stay tuned. That's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. Once again, I am your host, Dimithri Perera, and this has been the X-Men 97 After Show for Episode 3, Fire Made Flesh. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
THEK super strong or super fast. Gotta beat the boss and get the loot, cause it's the king, and we got geek news.